So this is Miles Beach doing his CHS 211 research question 10 video articles assignment. So my research question is the prevalence of obesity in youth correlated with the absence of children participating in sports? The reason I'm asking this is because I feel like there's been a large decrease in the amount of children participating in sports, and I feel like there's a significant correlation between that and child obesity. My inclusion criteria is I was looking for articles with evidence showing that sports participation directly affects obesity in children and other benefits that sports participation has. Now, many articles about obesity prevention were saying the same thing about diet and how sports can help. So I wanted to increase a little variety into my research with talking about the other benefits of child sports participation. So then there would be a lot less repetition in my research. And then my exclusion criteria is I was not looking for articles that included information about how a poor diet can cause obesity. The reason why I said this is because obesity prevention is a lot of the main sources are talking about diet and talking about how eating the right things can prevent obesity and help obesity. But I wanted to focus more on the sports aspect. So the reason why this is not in the correct APA format is because Google Docs doesn't work. So I'll fix this before I give it to you. My first article is called Team Sports for Overweight Children, Stanford Sports to Prevent Obesity Randomized Trials. So it's, in a sense, this was a giant test that Stanford did with 21 children who were overweight and financial hardship, and they were minorities, and they put them into an after-school sports program. And it showed that they all lost weight, and there was all this data and all this information. The second article is called The Prevention of Child Obesity First Do No Harm. This article is about a lot of different prevention techniques they use and a lot of different ideas that people have come up with. Main being that you cannot harm the children mentally to help him lose the weight. And so it's very interesting because it talks a lot about different techniques, different methods, different mental, psychological processes that people go through so that they can lose the weight better instead of just, going to depression or going to another mental state that isn't healthy. My third article is Do Youth Sports Prevent Pediatric Obesity? A Systematic Review and Commentary. So this is very straightforward. This is just straight up talks about sports and obesity and how they correlate with each other. And really the main parts I got from it were there are many features of youth sports make it a natural setting for pursuing obesity prevention goals. Very self-explanatory, just shows that it's very straightforward, answers the question directly. My fourth article is called Systematic Review of Health Benefits of Physical Activity and Fitness in School-Age Children and Youth. This is another one that's very self-explanatory. It talks about the very numerous health benefits that sports have. It talks about the activity guidelines that Canada has set out to prevent child obesity and kind of the results and benefits that it has shown, kind of the mistakes that they've made, and how they've worked past them. My fifth one is facts, sports activity in children. This is less obesity based, but it explains a lot about sports and how it affects the mind, not only the mind, but the body, social situations. It talks about financial benefits. It talks about creating unity between children and like creating a sense of bond and sense of teamwork. It really talks a lot about the other benefits that sports has, and it talks about obesity, but a lot less about obesity and a lot more about the other benefits. My next article is one of the most straightforward ones. It's called The 7 Charts That Show the State of Youth Sports in the U.S. and Why It Matters. So this is really important because it shows that it shows the significant decline in participation among 6 to 12-year-olds. This is kind of the thing that I was most worried about because I don't actually know. This is the evidence that shows that there is there's a decrease in sports participation, but it's the first evidence that I show in my research. And this is huge because it's 0.8 million children are less active in one whole year, in 5 whole years. That's massive, and it just kind of talks about the other participation difficulties that kids have. Like, it talks about the money, it talks about like obesity growing rapidly in children, and how it's so much faster in the U.S. than other countries. My next one is called Benefits of Sports to a Children's Mind and Heart, all part of the game. So the reason why I have this one is, again, it doesn't really talk about the same benefits that sports have with obesity directly, but it talks about how sports affects children's minds, how it does their bodies, how it affects their mental growth, how it makes people believe that sports participation is less about individuals and individualist ideals, but more about his team and teamwork and team bonding. And talks about how it instills a sense of bond and a sense of responsibility to children. My next one is called Early Adiposity Rebound Causes and Consequences for Obesity in Children and Adults. This is a much more professional look at the same kind of information sports participation has on mental health, children obesity, children adiposity. And the reason why I like this one so much is it's a lot more scientifically based. They show a lot more graphs. They show a lot more information instead of it being more subjective. It's much more objective. My next one is the Canadian Childhood Obesity Epidemic Related to Physical Inactivity. So this is just straightforward facts about sports participation directly affecting obesity, and it was done directly from Canada, and it has a lot of, I can't really zoom in, but it shows a very specific information about how children participate. If children participate in sports, their likelihood of obesity directly decreases, and it's very straightforward, and it just shows kind of the results without really going outside of what I want. And then the next one is much more not about obesity, but about mental ability, about kind of the benefits that it has psychologically over the children, and instead of focusing on the obesity, it focuses on the mental aspect, and that has a huge effect on the obesity aspect and other benefits that sports have. And then it talks a lot about how setting a goal in sports can affect psychologically children's outcomes, of how they pursue goals, how they achieve other levels. And then for my last two are the ones I'm not going to use. And the reasons I'm not going to use them is because instead of talking about the positive effects of sports participation, it's a lot of negative things, like how it can prevent growth. Starting to build muscle mass before the age of 14 can start hinting growth and start compressing bone density, and how injury is such a bad thing. So the first one I talk about is called the overuse injuries in youth sports biomechanical considerations. So it talks a lot about sports injuries, the negative effects, how it can cause lifelong issues, and it's not really something I want to include in my research. A, it's really off topic, and B, it just shows the negative sides of sports. And then the last one is pros and cons of sports competition at the high school level. This is kind of the same thing, where it's a lot of off-topic stuff, and a lot of stuff that I don't want to include because it's so negative, but it talks a lot more instead about the physical aspect, talks a lot about the mental aspect, and how competition creates kind of a diversity between people, and it causes people to see others as enemies instead of other people. And so that's another reason why I didn't include that. So thank you for listening. That was my first 10 video articles.